My name is Dana Holloway. I'm 41 years old. For most of my adult life, I believed in building things slowly, with love, loyalty, and sacrifice. I met Robert when I was 25. He was charismatic, sharp, and had the kind of ambition that made you believe in something bigger than yourself. I fell for him not just because of who he was, but because of who I thought we could become together. We married young, filled with promises, whispered under soft light, surrounded by dreams we hadn't yet touched. But some people love the idea of forever more than the work it takes to live it. I remember the day he first said the word infertile like it was a label, not a wound. We'd been trying for 3 years. Doctors, tests, holistic treatments. I gave everything, my time, my hope, my body. And each month, the silence of a negative test felt louder than the last. Still, I never let go of him. But he let go of me long before I saw it. I saw it in his eyes when he stopped holding mine. I felt it in the way our house grew quieter, colder, his late nights becoming regular, his phone always face down. One morning I came down to the kitchen and saw him sitting there, calm, too calm. He said we needed to talk like adults. His words were polished, rehearsed. He said he couldn't stay in a marriage that didn't grow, that he wanted a family, that love was no longer enough. And then just like that, he called me a burden. A woman with defective roots, he said. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just stood there, watching the man I had sacrificed for, the man I thought I'd grow old with, cut me down like I was a failed project. He served me divorce papers the next week. He was already living like a single man, new clothes, new car, and I later found out a new woman. Younger, fertile, full of everything he claimed I lacked. He told me to move out of the house, said he'd bought me out and that the place was his investment anyway. I left with a suitcase, a broken heart, and a womb full of grief. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just left. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, something told me this wasn't the end of my story, it was just the start of a new chapter. To everyone else, I disappeared. Quietly, no dramatic posts, no angry calls to friends. I just vanished from the life he was so quick to erase me from. But what he never understood, what men like him never understand, is that silence doesn't mean defeat. It means preparation. And when a woman rebuilds herself in silence, she doesn't return the same. He thought he ended me. He thought infertility was the end of my story. But life has a strange way of reshuffling the deck when you least expect it. I didn't know it then, but something miraculous was already on its way to me. And this time, no one would take it away. The weeks that followed felt like walking through a dense fog, every step heavy, every breath a reminder that I was now alone. I rented a small apartment in the quieter part of town, far from the neighborhoods we used to frequent. I avoided the coffee shops we once loved, the parks where we dreamed about the children we'd raise. My body felt like a graveyard of plans we had buried together, and yet each morning I got up, I made my tea, I answered emails, I lived quietly, slowly, softly. That's how healing begins, without announcement or applause. I had moments when I wanted to scream, not because I missed him, but because I missed the woman I was before he broke me. I missed trusting without fear, giving without thinking I'd be punished for it later. You see, betrayal doesn't just shatter the bond between two people. It fragments your very identity. I started questioning everything. Was I too patient, too hopeful, too naive? I had confused my loyalty with self-sacrifice, and looking back, there were signs, subtle ones, but I was too in love to see them, too hopeful to admit the cracks had been forming for years. Robert wasn't a villain in the classic sense. He was strategic, charming. He used words the way some people use knives, sharp enough to wound, but clean enough to hide the evidence. He'd belittle my hopes gently, dismiss my opinions with a smile, and when I cried, he'd call it emotional manipulation. It was a slow erosion of self, and yet I still tried to love him through it. That's the most painful part of betrayal. It's not always a loud betrayal. Sometimes it's the quiet abandonment by someone who claimed they'd stay. As I sat in my new apartment, surrounded by unfamiliar walls and second-hand furniture, I began to rebuild, not just my home, but my mind. I enrolled in a short online course, started journaling every night, and visited a fertility specialist on my own. Not because I was chasing motherhood, but because I wanted to know the truth for me. And that's when I heard the words that would change everything. Dana, your blood work looks good. We just need to run a few more tests. But nothing here says you're infertile. I sat in my car for an hour after that appointment, staring out the windshield, frozen. All those years. All that shame. And it was never even true. Robert had called me infertile, not because a doctor said so, but because he needed a reason to justify leaving. He needed a way to make me feel small, so he could walk away tall. That's when something inside me shifted. Not with rage, but with resolve. I wasn't just healing anymore. I was getting ready. They say revenge is best served cold, but I wasn't looking for revenge in the way most people think of it. I wasn't planning to hurt him. I was planning to rise so completely that his words would haunt him every time he looked in the mirror. And that kind of revenge, it takes patience, it takes power, it takes grace. I began to move differently after that moment. Something inside me had snapped into place, not in anger, but in alignment. I wasn't the same woman who had been cast aside like a broken toy. I was waking up to the truth of who I was, and it was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. I took the results from that specialist and tucked them into my drawer, not to prove anything to anyone else, but to remind myself that I wasn't broken. I never had been. I just believed the wrong voice for too long. I didn't reach out to Robert. I didn't feel the need to wave this truth in his face. Because real power doesn't come from retaliation. It comes from choosing to build something sacred in silence. So I kept to myself. I worked. I saved. I switched careers and started consulting remotely. I found peace in long walks, the rhythm of routine, and in the friendships I had once neglected while trying to fix a man who didn't want to be healed. And slowly, life began to whisper new dreams into my ear, dreams I hadn't dared to entertain since the divorce. One night, I found myself staring at a blank adoption application on my laptop. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but the mere thought stirred something deep in me. A month later, after much prayer, I decided to begin fertility treatment on my own terms. I told no one, not even my closest friends. I went through it quietly, one appointment at a time, one injection at a time, one silent night after another. And each time I heard my own heartbeat through the monitor, I felt like I was rewriting my story. Months passed. Then came the test. I took it in silence. I waited in silence. And when the 2 lines appeared, I wept into my hands, not from desperation, not from fear, but from the overwhelming relief of finally being seen by the universe. 2 lines. A new life. No, not just one. 2. Twins. After all the heartbreak, after all the labels, after all the shame that had been forced upon me, I was carrying life. I was becoming a mother. I still didn't reach out to him. I didn't need his apology. I didn't want his validation. But life has its own poetic timing, doesn't it? It was 6 months into my pregnancy when I saw his name flash across my phone. Not once, not twice, 3 times. I didn't answer. I just stared at it. Curious, calm, quiet, because by then, I already knew the moment he reached out was not about me. It was about something he had lost. Something he couldn't touch anymore. So I let him wait. I let him wonder. I let silence do the talking. And while he paced wherever he was, drowning in curiosity or guilt, I sat in my living room, hand over my belly, feeling the tiny flutters of the 2 souls growing inside of me. He had no idea that the very thing he claimed I could never give the world was now growing stronger by the day, and that was only the beginning. When Robert reached out again, this time through email, his words were cautious, almost rehearsed. He asked how I was, said he'd been thinking a lot about the past, told me he was sorry if he ever hurt me. The irony wasn't lost on me. If, as though he wasn't sure, as though pain was just a possibility, not a fact, etched into the years he left me unraveling. I didn't reply, not because I was bitter, but because I'd outgrown the need to justify my silence. The apology came not from growth, but from discomfort. That I could feel in every line. Soon after, I heard whispers from mutual acquaintances. His new marriage, the one he had left me to pursue, was crumbling. She had left. No kids. No closure. She'd moved across the country. He had apparently made some poor business decisions and lost his biggest contract. The house we once shared had gone on the market. He was unraveling, and not because I willed it, but because what you build on broken truths will eventually collapse under its own weight. He had planted his future in soil he poisoned himself. Around that time, I received an envelope in the mail, no return address, just my name written in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. Inside was a short note from Robert. He'd found out about the pregnancy. Someone must have told him. The note said he was shocked, happy for me, and wanted to talk. He ended it with, "Maybe we could reconnect." I folded the note and tucked it away, not out of sentiment, but because it was the final nail in the old life I had already buried. He didn't know the full story. He didn't know I'd done this alone, on my terms, through my own strength. He didn't know the names I had picked out of the nursery I had built with hands that once trembled but now stood steady. His words, once weapons, now felt dull, echoes from a man who had mistaken control for connection. And I began to realize his downfall wasn't about losing me. It was about losing access to what he once dismissed as worthless. I had become the proof that his judgment wasn't just cruel, it was wrong. I started receiving flowers. No name on the card, just soft petals and fading scent. He was trying everything except the one thing that mattered: accountability. And by now I didn't crave it. I didn't need him to see my children, or even know their names. I wasn't building this life as a mirror to reflect regret back to him. I was building it as a testament to my own rebirth. Every bottle I washed, every lullaby I rehearsed, was a quiet rebellion, a declaration that I was never infertile. I was just waiting to bloom on my own timeline.
He thought I was gone, that I'd disappear in the shadow of his ambition. But now, he was the one watching from the sidelines, uninvited, unacknowledged, unnecessary. And as his kingdom crumbled brick by brick, I didn't need to say a word, because the most powerful revenge is not destruction, it's creation. And I had created life.
The twins were born on a rainy Wednesday morning. A boy and a girl. Perfect, whole, and healthy. I named them Elias and Maya, names I had chosen long before I knew they would ever be real. Holding them for the first time, I didn't think of Robert. I didn't think of the pain or the words he used to strip me down. I thought only of the miracle I was holding. 2 lives that came from a woman once told she was barren. The nurse called it a medical surprise. I called it a divine correction. Weeks passed, and I was wrapped in the beautiful chaos of new motherhood. Sleepless nights, soft coos, the overwhelming scent of powder and possibility. And then, one morning I received a letter from Robert's lawyer. Not a lawsuit, not a demand, just a request. He wanted to be informed. He claimed he had a right to know if the children were his. That was his angle now, trying to make his way into a story he had forfeited years ago. I held the letter in one hand, Maya in the other, and smiled. Not bitter, not amused, just calm, because I already knew the truth. I instructed my attorney to respond with dignity. No emotion, no access. I had chosen to become a mother through IVF, using a donor, not because I wanted to cut him out, but because he had never been part of the equation. My children were born from choice, not chance. I didn't need to explain that to him. I simply allowed the facts to speak, and once those facts reached him, the silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. His pride, which once stood taller than our marriage, had finally been reduced to whispers. His world grew smaller. He sold the house. His name appeared in a bankruptcy notice. He moved into a modest rental, no longer the polished man in expensive suits, but a figure drifting in the aftermath of choices made in arrogance. But I didn't watch with glee. I didn't celebrate his downfall. I barely thought of him at all, because I wasn't chasing justice anymore. I had already found it in the rhythm of my daughter's heartbeats, in the weight of my son falling asleep on my chest. There were no confrontations, no climactic showdowns. I didn't need to stand in front of him and demand an apology, because when a woman rises in her own power, she no longer needs permission. I walked through fire, and when I came out, I didn't look for those who left me to burn. I built something sacred from the ashes. That was justice. That was closure. That was peace. Robert became a footnote in a story he thought he authored, and I, the woman once called infertile, had become the author of a brand new legacy, one that didn't carry his name, his shame, or his shadow. There's a certain kind of strength you earn when you rebuild yourself from silence. Not the kind that needs to be flaunted or defended, but the kind that moves quietly through a room and changes everything without speaking a word. That's who I became. Not because I planned revenge, but because I chose rebirth. I no longer looked in the mirror, searching for the woman Robert left behind. I saw someone wiser, softer, stronger, someone who had not only survived abandonment, but had transformed it into the foundation of something extraordinary. When I walked through the park now, stroller in hand, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I wasn't carrying any echo of the insults he once hurled my way. I carried only diapers, pacifiers, and the laughter of two souls who reminded me every day that I had always been enough. Strangers smiled and asked if twins ran in the family. I'd just smile back. They didn't need the backstory. They didn't need to know about the labels, or the exile, or the years of waiting. All they needed to see was joy, and that's all I gave them. I received one last letter from him months later, right around the twins' first birthday. It was handwritten, and for the first time it didn't ask for anything. He said he saw a picture of me through someone else's feed. Said he hadn't recognized me, that I looked radiant, peaceful. He wrote, "I don't know how you did it, but you look happier than I ever made you." And he was right. I didn't respond. Not because I hated him, but because that chapter no longer held space in the story I was writing. In the quiet of my home, after the twins had gone to sleep, I would sometimes sip tea by the window and just watch the streetlights flicker. I used to wonder what my life would have been if he had stayed. But now I only wondered how I had ever believed I needed him to begin with. Sometimes it takes losing everything you thought you wanted to discover everything you were meant for. And I had found it, in their smiles, in my peace, in the quiet moments I used to fill with grief, now overflowing with grace. I don't need my children to know about the pain that preceded their arrival. They will grow up knowing love, not loss. Strength, not shame. And if they ever ask where they came from, I will tell them they were born from a woman who chose to rise, who believed in possibility when the world whispered limits. They will know that miracles don't come to those who wait idly, but to those who walk forward even when their hearts are breaking. And as for Robert, wherever he is now, I don't wish him pain. I don't wish him regret. I wish him understanding. Not for my sake, but for his own. Because life has a way of teaching us with or without our permission. And while he called me infertile, life called me mother. That will always be the final word. There is a moment, quiet, soft, and still, when you realize the war is over. Not because someone surrendered, but because you simply stopped fighting. That moment came to me one afternoon, as I watched Elias and Maya playing on the floor, their laughter echoing through the walls that once knew only silence. I realized I no longer carried the need to prove anything, not to him, not to the world, not even to myself. I had already become everything I was told I couldn't be, and more. I don't need revenge. I don't need him to see the life he walked away from. I've seen it, I've lived it, and it's mine. The irony is that he will likely spend years trying to reclaim a version of his past, while I spend mine raising the future. Every time I soothe a tear, kiss a forehead, or whisper a lullaby in the dark, I am reminded that life chose me, that God didn't forget me. He was just preparing something that couldn't be rushed, and someone who had to be rebuilt in the fire. Sometimes I wonder if Robert truly understands what he gave up. Not just me, not just the potential of a family, but the chance to evolve, to grow, to stand beside a woman who would have gone to war for him but instead had to learn how to fight for herself. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But the truth is, it no longer matters, because my life isn't a response to his decisions, it's a celebration of my own. People still whisper. Some are surprised, some are inspired, and a few are silently uncomfortable with how gracefully I rose. That's the thing about silent victories. They unsettle those who depend on your suffering to justify their own choices. But I don't explain, I don't clarify, I just keep living. And in that, there's more power than any confrontation could ever offer. If I could say one thing to the woman I was on the day he left me, it would be this. You don't need him to see your worth. You don't need his apology to be whole. One day you'll wake up and realize you are everything he said you'd never become. And you'll be free, not because he let you go, but because you finally let him go. And that day, my love, will feel like resurrection. So this is the last time I'll ever speak his name in connection to mine. From here forward, I am Dana Holloway. Mother, survivor, creator of a life no one thought I could have, and that is more than enough.